Joining me today is Lakshmi Shenoy, the CEO of Embarc Collective. It's wonderful to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
So you are on the launch pad. Last time you were in, it was sort of a aspirational time, and holy heck, a lot of stuff's been built and is rolling. And what's the latest on Embarc?
Yeah, it's happening so fast, it's hard to keep up. So I've been in Tampa Bay now just over a year, and we laid out a strategy, and really we see our role as being able to help startup talent in this region build bold, scalable, thriving companies, and we do that by providing not only programming support for those companies that's totally customized, it's individualized for the company's specific needs and their specific milestones. But we're also building a physical space to really be a central landing zone for this type of entrepreneur and a way to create and foster even more community for building great technology startups, because we all know that building a company is very lonely. And so when you find peers who are doing the same thing, it can have really unbelievable impact on your ability to do the job day in and day out and night in and night out. So where we are with all of that is that back in March, we launched everything that we can do except space
Mm.
for 25 early stage companies. And these companies applied to be a part of Embarc Collective. And so they're receiving all of the services that we have, which include specialized coaching that matches the founder and their milestones with a coach on our staff to ensure that we're helping these companies articulate their milestones and achieve their milestones towards growth. And then in addition, all of the startup teams, every member of the team has access to my team, and my team serves like a platform team that you would see in a venture fund. So they all have a specialty. It might be marketing, it might be talent strategy, it might be engineering and analytics or customer success. So if you're on a startup team and you're heading up marketing,
Mm.
you have that peer partner on my team. Our marketing person sits down with you, and sometimes they may have guidance of, here's the playbook of how I've done it, and this is what's worked and this is what hasn't. Sometimes you're learning together and figuring it out together, but just having somebody whose job it is to help you as a team member with that specific function has had unbelievable impact to the companies that we're supporting. So all of that is in place. It's now been 3 months of that being in place. All the while, we are also really focused on building out our physical space. And so that's a 32,000 square foot facility in downtown Tampa. It's built with three goals in mind: giving people spaces to build, to learn, and to collaborate. And so you'll feel a lot of energy around that learning and collaboration, but there's still areas to focus so that you can really build. And so that space is going to come online at the end of the year, and it's going to be tremendous. I think anytime someone's in Tampa, it'd be great to have them over, because there's spaces for the public, there's spaces just for the startups that we're supporting. But we really want this to feel owned by the community.
And you mentioned peer support being a huge part of that. How are you baking in programmatically some of the founder to founder support between the organizations?
Absolutely. So the way right now, and this is always a work in progress, we're figuring out what works and what doesn't work for the companies that we're supporting. But right now, you get this one-on-one support from coaches and the function-specific coaches on our teams, and on my team. And then in addition, every week we have a single function-specific programming event. In that case, we're usually flying in somebody from around the country who's a specific expert in a pain point that multiple companies are outlining. And so we're bringing that person in a very intimate peer learning environment. Think of it as 5 to 10 people
Mhm.
sitting around a table with this expert, where you're able to ask the questions that are really applicable to you. I find that oftentimes when you're at an event and there's a Q&A, you feel this pressure to ask a question that's going to be relevant to the whole audience. It's the opposite here. Ask the question that matters to you. And you have that space and to be able to do that in this type of setting. And in doing that, we're creating these peer-to-peer connections, and we're using online tools as well. Everyone subsists off of Slack, and so We have our member Slack, and it's amazing to watch the peer-to-peer connectivity happen where someone asks for help and somebody else offers to help, and you can create traction through those interactions.
So when you bring this expert in, you're saying that you're intentionally having multiple iterations of these meetings instead of having one group where maybe all 25 founders come. You're saying we're going to have a couple of different instances of 5 to 10, so you can get this more connected Q&A.
Typically, we just do one instance of 5 to 10 because it's such a specific pain point that maybe 5 people have voiced through their coaching sessions. And we see it in our world. Right now, we're serving 25 companies.
Right.
If 5 companies are echoing the same pain point, that's enough of a percentage for us to say, "Hey, we should do something about that." So that's exactly our approach, and that intimacy, I think, creates a sense of accessibility. It also ensures that you walk out of there with some productive next steps to advance your business. Nothing is more frustrating for me to go to, spend my time not working and be inspired, but not really know what the path forward is. And so we really want to make sure that all of our programming has a very tactical angle. And that's just the way that our organization works. I think there's space for every type of content, but that's what we're focused on.
And so you have the core team that's yours, then you have the coaches that kind of wrap around them. Can you kind of tell us what the archetype is of the coaches that wrap around?
Absolutely. So the coaches are a really interesting type of experience. So everybody on my team, whether or not you are an executive advisor coach, so really someone focused on strategy and leadership, or if you're a function specific expert on our team, everybody has startup experience. So that I'm pulling them from the startup world onto my team.
Hmm.
The coaches who are focused on strategy and leadership, they are former startup operators. So they all have decades of startup experience. Sometimes it's at the early stage, sometimes it's at growth stage, sometimes they've been a part of an acquisition or an exit, sometimes they've been part of scaling really quickly. So we're leveraging that experience, but the coach's job is really to listen.
Hmm.
Sometimes the founder just needs somebody to say, I need you to sit on the other side of the table and listen to what I have to say so that I can figure out what I'm trying to say. So it might be a coach and a whiteboard and them listening just to get everything that is, when you're a founder, you have 1,000 priorities that
Hmm.
are all the number one priority,
Hmm.
and you cannot figure out how to put the right foot in front of the left foot to make any traction happen. And so when you have this mechanism of a third party to hear everything that you have going on and help you sequence what forward looks like, that's a good use of your time. That creates a path forward and that creates a measurable path forward. You can figure out, okay, this has to happen, then this has to happen, or this is my true number one priority. And if I don't do this, I will not survive to tomorrow or I will not survive to 10 years. And so being able to have that listener who is paid to be listening to you. I mean, that they're a member, they're not a volunteer, they're a member of our staff. And I think that also creates that accountability on our end because it's our job to help you. And it really creates a shift of a paradigm that a lot of entrepreneurs are used to in the startup world.
Yeah. And obviously you've got prioritization, you've got accountability, and to some extent the coaches act as psychologists because there's a lot of overwhelm, and that certainly their experience goes a long way. How much of that in planning and building this framework does just I won't say mental health is a bit of a strong term, but just dealing with the stresses of cash flow and all the uncertainty in the startup world. How much do you guys bake that into what you're planning?
Yeah, I mean, you can't understate the importance of mental health, particularly when it comes to entrepreneurship. I don't remember what the statistic is, but if there's it's the percentage of entrepreneurs that are suffering from some sort of mental health issue is staggering, and so we have to be really mindful of it. That being said, we aren't trained medical professionals who are qualified
Right.
to guide somebody with specifically their mental health. So it's on us to make sure that we're compiling resources, that we are understanding when do you raise the red flag of, hey, I'm working with someone that really needs some additional help.
Right.
What can we do to bring the qualified resource into play? But for a lot of companies and a lot of founders, having somebody to listen to and just when you're, even if you have a team, being a founder is so lonely. Being able to talk about cash flow, that's not something you necessarily want to talk about with your team. If you're also stressed about keeping your team loyal and confident about your ability to continue forward, you're not going to talk about your cash flow issues with them. And so having somebody who is on your side, they're not neutral. They're actually on your side and they want you to be successful, because our organization is about how do we make the path to success a little bit easier for founders. And so having that person to listen, it does take some of the burden of stress off, even if it's not technically therapy. And then when we see those signals that we may need to bring in additional support, we do so, and we bring in that support from somebody who's qualified to do so.
Right. And you made an interesting point earlier, and that is a lot of responsibility to put on the coaches. And you mentioned that they're paid and they're not volunteers. So, in Tampa Bay, historically, most entrepreneurial support organizations haven't had the resources. They've had some core staff, but then also relied on a lot of volunteers. I think almost without exception, there's at least some element of that. And so, what was your sort of thinking behind that? Are you using any volunteers, or have you, what's been sort of your strategic philosophy behind when to use unpaid labor versus paid people?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and this is not a something that's exclusive to Tampa Bay. The organization I came from had 600 volunteer mentors, and um, I think that for some of those interactions, they're game changing for those companies. If you meet the right mentor, they can change the trajectory of your business. But especially when you have 600 mentors in an organization, it's hard to vet, and it's hard to match make as well. It's hard to make sure that the pain point that this company is feeling aligns with the expertise of the mentor who's working with you. And so this is not a regional epidemic. This is not even a U.S. epidemic. This is just something that I see in volunteer mentorship overall.
Right.
And it's not to slight volunteer mentorship at all. I think that all of my mentors that happen to be volunteers, I'm not paying them.
Yeah.
No one is, but I rely on them heavily. But I will say that in the early stages of building a company, you want to be around somebody who sees a lot of patterns and has had a lot of experience seeing and working with a lot of companies. And when you almost like codify that role into an actual job,
Hmm.
you're giving that person the opportunity to meet a lot of companies and see those patterns and figure out, okay, your journey is slightly different from another company's, but there's some parallels. And let's talk about what those parallels are. And let's think about how do we help. And they have a stake in the game. I volunteer for a lot of organizations, and sometimes life takes the priority over my volunteer obligations. And for my organization, 'cause our core offering is support.
Hmm.
And if I thought of support as a product, I need to make sure that I deliver my product really well. And I can't have a volunteer group of developers build my product for me. I've got to pay them so that they're aligned in the interest and the investment of time and mental energy to do the best job possible. So that's my little soapbox on that front. And it's different. Not every organization, most organizations are not going this route, and for good reason. We have a much smaller team because we're paying people.
Right.
So there's trade-offs. You don't get the breadth of different voices, but what you do get is consistency and accountability by your team to deliver the core product to our customers, which are startups.
And how does that also then feed into your growth planning, as far as, a lot of times the people who are using volunteers have this sort of limitless, we'll just take anybody in or that can come, and we'll just keep trying to find volunteers to feed that. Whereas if you have a limited staff, what their capacity is, then you're kind of then limiting how you can grow, and intentionally wanting to keep that product at that certain in that certain lane.
Yeah. You think about tensions that you've built into your own business, that is 100% the tension that I've built into this business, which is capacity. And very different from the companies that we are supporting, because we're supporting globally scalable technology startups, my business is not scalable. It is totally reliant on the people that are delivering the product for us. And that product is support. So it's a tension that I deal with every day as I think about how do we grow, but how do we also keep the quality of our product at the level that I aspire to.
And internally, what is the your sort of internal drive for growth? Is that a big part of what you're doing, or are you mainly focused on just refining the product to perfection, and growth becomes a secondary element of that?
It's a great question, and I don't know if have a sort of a 5-year vision around what growth looks like. I'll give you a little bit of background on my perspective. So I came from an organization, a tremendous organization in Chicago, 1871, that was serving 500 early stage startups, and it was creating this giant population of startup talent. Because 500 startups, you're serving thousands of people on a given day. And I had a chance to experience the pros and cons of that. The pros are that you have that from a growth standpoint, that is good from a business model. Obviously, more customers is a good thing. But at the same time, what you're doing is your touch points with the individuals that you're serving are just far less.
Mhm.
Because even if you have 600 mentors like we had, as a team, as a team of 10, you can't be with every individual on a given day.
Mhm.
I've swung to the opposite side of the spectrum. So I went from volume to a very intimate focus on how do we ensure that the companies that we're serving, we do it in a very high touch way. And so that may not stay forever, but for now, I'm really focused on that, primarily because in this region, as we look at what we would think of as an early stage technology venture, we need more success stories to come out of this region. And so from my perspective, what that means is that we need to be there for the teams that are trying to be the wins for this region and dedicate our time and our resources in helping them to become successful, because their success is going to beget more success.
Mhm.
So if we can get some wins on the board with the smaller population of startups, what my hope is that we'll end up seeing a higher volume of companies to support. What that means for my business model, I don't know yet.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That's exactly what my philosophy is. I think that for as much as you can market a region, you can set up infrastructure, all of that is hugely important, and there are people doing that. But in the resources that we have sort of in my circle, our philosophy is very much to concentrate on wins. And
Mhm.
even when we cross over into some of the consulting we do in the nonprofit space, you always hear how we have 10,000 nonprofits, and so many people are trying to solve for all 10,000 nonprofits. But the reality is that the ones that the top few percent that have a massive impact are the ones to that we really need to make sure that they succeed and stay, and get them over to the hump of sustainability. And certainly you can see already the language changing from we're on up and coming and et cetera, et cetera. And the minute we have a few unicorns to talk about, that's all anybody wants to talk about, because the unicorns are what drive the attention. And then ideally, you start to get the similar types of businesses that kind of wrap around those unicorns, and that's how brands for locations grow. So
Mhm.
I think that's great. I'm very much of the same mindset that the wins are hugely important, and that concentrated firepower on getting those wins is where it's at.
Absolutely.
So expanding your network, there was some news out recently about the partnership with 50 or so other entities. What was sort of the genesis behind that, and what's the objective with that?
Yeah, so it's twofold. So on Monday we announced 50 local, regional, and national partners, and this was driven by an effort that Ali Felix, our director of platform, really pushed forward in a tremendous way. There's two reasons why this was critical for our organization. So let me first start at the local angle. Um, as a newcomer to this region, did not want to come in and build duplication, and I didn't want to build a silo. Quite frankly, we don't have enough startups in this region where people can say, like, I'm only going to work with one organization. I think that what's really critical is that startup founders and teams are leveraging all of the resources they have access to, and they don't have to be isolated to a single organization. As organizations, let's remember that we share a core customer of early stage founders and teams, and it's all of our objectives to ensure that they're successful. So let's chip in wherever we can to help make that success happen. And so, as somebody who's coming in brand new to the market, under a mandate, build something new for this region, I didn't want to come in and say, let's build something new, and you can only do it through one organization. What we wanted to do was think about and be really overt about the fact that we are actively seeking opportunities to collaborate, because if we collaborate, that's going to be more efficient with resources and in the end deliver better support for the companies that we are collectively trying to serve.
Mhm.
We didn't call ourselves Embarc Collective on accident. That collective piece of our name was very, very purposeful. So that's the local aspect of making sure that we were very formalized and over about our intention to collaborate across the region. On the regional, and I say regional, I'm thinking more statewide
Mhm.
and national partnerships, that's really focused on making sure that the entrepreneurs that we're serving in this region have access to whatever they need as they are building their company. And when I say that, I mean a couple of different things. The Tampa Bay region is amazing, but people need to get on planes to go see their customers and see their investors, whether they're current or potential investors. And the nice thing is we have a wonderful airport, the best I think in the world. And so they need to be able to hop onto that plane and get to their destination to make their business grow. Well, why don't we set up relationships with different regions and the regions that the startups that we're supporting are heading to the most?
Mhm.
Why don't we instead create connectivity for the companies so that when you're going to California, you're headed to Silicon Valley, you know you have a home. You could work out of there, you could leverage the resources. You have access to another community just because of your relationship with Embarc Collective. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of having this collaboration with these different organizations is being able to have an open line of communication to share best practices,
Mhm.
as being able to share opportunities. So we're thinking about a statewide opportunity now, having these relationships and these partnerships in place. That means we have go-to people in Miami, we have go-to people in Orlando, we've got go-to people in Jacksonville and Tallahassee. All of that is really critical to making success happen faster
Right.
because you've already had the partnerships in place. You don't have to foster them. You don't have to newly foster them. Obviously, we want to keep engaging with these organizations. So right now it's a lot about self service of the companies in this region and how we can best support them. But in the future, I want that pipeline coming the opposite way. I want our partners. 1871 is a partner in Chicago. I want the entrepreneurs there to think about, oh, well, when I'm in Tampa Bay for business, or maybe I'm on a vacation and I need to spend a day working, uh, I want to be able to come to Embarc Collective and we already have that relationship in place. So it's really about how do we create access and efficiency for the startups we're serving.
All right. Well, there's a few things I want to dig into there. That's great. So it's the genesis was here with Ali, and so as you reach out, then is there any sort of draw to try to get the people you've connected with to connect with each other, and then sort of a follow on to that is then how does this actually express itself functionally? So when obviously it sounds like then you've got as part of this agreement is you can share co-working or so on and so forth. So it's like a reciprocal relationship for museums or those types of things. So what's the plan for connecting the besides just the you as the nexus here, and then how will it functionally express itself? How are you keeping connected?
We're keeping it organic. I don't think that there's really a need to formalize it. But what's really fascinating is after the announcement just came out on Monday, so just a couple of days ago, and we've had some of our partners then ask us, "Hey, can you connect us with this other partner in another state?" And we're happy to do so. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be a league of supporters. It's really what it is instead is just people trying to do their jobs, and they know a point person to get connected with another organization. And we don't have to be the nexus.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it, is that I don't know exactly how to describe the visual on a podcast, but I'm thinking of a visual where you have a bunch of nexuses.
Sure.
It's basically like a social
Well, you're
networking
just the
map.
nexus in that you guys started it.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
the forever nexus, but
and to
yeah.
be fair, I borrowed the playbook from my old home in 1871. So it's, we're not the first to ever think about partnerships, but we are pretty aggressive about it. To be a brand new organization and to announce 50 startup partnerships
Yep.
is pretty tremendous. And to be able to say to a company that's based in Tampa Bay, you're not limited in access to what's around nationally. Now we've got to grow internationally and make sure that we're creating even more connectivity for the startups that are growing here.
And when you touched on another area that we spend a lot of our time here thinking about, and that is, going back to the nonprofit space. There's a lot of them, and a lot of them overlap in the best way for them, for folks to interact that are in the same space. And actually, Martha Bowden, who's the CEO of SPCA, had some really, really strong, I thought leadership in that area, and she shared what she's working on, which is, instead of having lots of different sort of kennels or animal intakes that all do things decently well as generalists, she's really working hard to recognize people who have exceptional skills in certain things. So shy, fearful dogs she used as an example. She knows one place that's not her that actually has a great setup for this. And so even though the front end may all, the front end intake may all still be there, and obviously their numbers are tied to how many animals come in the front door, on the back door, the idea that instead of, if all shy, fearful dogs go to this place and all aggressive breeds go to this place, that they become better experts at those things.
Hmm.
And so the sum, the total of all the organizations that the service provider is lifted because of that expertise. So,
Hmm.
that's one thing, trying to figure out, who can be specialized in one specific thing, I think is
And that's the benefit of having these partnerships in place. I think that is an aspiration that we should all be able to identify our strengths and really be able to exploit those strengths. And I say exploit in a really positive way. Um, Now, what I would say is that we are training our strength. We're new, so we're training our strength to be about customized, individualized, peer learning. And I say peer learning, saying that you've got your peer who sits on my team and they're available to you. That is what we are really good at, and then we're also that's complemented by this physical space that is for the community and the startups to build, learn, and collaborate. That's our world. And then I think being clear, every organization, there's 65 entrepreneurial support organizations in this region. So if every organization can go through that exercise of saying, like, this is what we are really, really good at,
right.
and this is where we're investing ourselves. I mean, if you looked at my P&L, you would see where we are investing, and you see that it aligns perfectly with what I just said.
Sure.
And so making sure every organization can speak to their strengths so that then the startups can say, okay, I need a little of this, I need a little of that, or this aligns really well with what I'm trying to do. We are not great for idea stage companies. We need our companies to be a bit further along to be able to really support them well. Our offering is really not set up to support small businesses or non-technical businesses. I talk to a lot of founders around, can you help my business? And I have to tell them, listen, like we have primed our product to work on scalable technology ventures,
Hmm.
and I would be doing you a disservice if I said to you, sure, we can help you.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do instead is connect those entrepreneurs with the resources that we know of that have articulated their strengths and it aligns with what they're doing. It'd be great to have a map and just say, like, here it is. Here's the lay of the land, and it's sort of a strengths-based map.
Well, and I want to give you maximum kudos for doing that. That's important leadership. You're not just out there trying to gobble up every company you can. You're saying this is what we're going to do, and you're adhering to that strategic plan to to become an expert in that area. And I think that's exactly what we need, is just a lot of really specific experts that can all join together. And I think we're stronger as a collective,
Absolutely.
with that happening.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So it looks like right now, last we talked, end of the year, early next year for doors open on the physical space.
Yeah.
And then when will you open up again for another round of applications?
So another round of applications will launch in July. The space is expected to open in December. I've been wrong about this estimate before, so but it's when I say I don't mean I. I mean there are so many people working behind the scenes on the design of the space is amazing and it's complete. Construction has already started. We've been 2 months into construction already. And so I'm there every morning to see it because honestly, I need that motivation. I need to see the progress that the space makes on a daily basis. And I make it seem like the space is doing the work. It's actually an amazing team from creative contractors that are doing the work, but they are pushing it forward. And so being able to see that traction every day motivates me. And it makes it clear to me that we're just one step closer to our goal of having a full launch of not only the programming, but also the physical space. 'Cause that's really when the magic happens, is when you can create that learning community in a single place and have access to all of those resources in a single place and start to create the what we call serendipitous. Um, we call it curated serendipity. When we know who's in the space and we know that there are really important connections to be made. When I was in Chicago, oftentimes I would have a VIP visitor visiting 1871 in Chicago, and I would tell a startup, sit right there at 10:14. I'm going to walk by and I'm going to run into you and I'm going to pitch your business and introduce you to this person. And guess what? Magic happens when you
Yeah.
do that. And so being able to put that whole offering together is that's gets me so excited and every day we're one step closer to that vision.
Wonderful. We're gonna have to keep an eye on those VIP visitors though, because last time that happened, one of those times that happened in Chicago, you ended up.
I know. Exactly.
We don't
Exactly.
want that happening again. So
Exactly. Yeah.
the teams can meet them, but you can't meet them.
Exactly. Fair enough.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
It's
Thanks for
always
having me.
great to catch up, and
Yeah.
we love watching the progress, and we'll continue to support you in whatever way we can.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.